So we have a very special guest today, WheelStair, one of our partner companies. We had the webinar a few weeks ago when we introduced the company. So the goal today is not to talk about what the company does and the history and the product, but rather answer some of the questions that students have had over these weeks as they've been working on the challenge. And so I see we have a few students who already joined online, so there will be probably more. And if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. In fact, the group is relatively small in this live chat room, so feel free to raise your hand. We will add you here. You can talk or just type your questions. Meanwhile, we also have received quite a few questions from the students already, and I put them in the FAQ frequently asked questions database. So we would like to ask those questions. And in addition, a small group of teams are already done with their work. And so we have their full text reports. And I wanted to share those reports and show them to our company representative here and maybe ask for some feedback and comments, just in case you guys have similar ideas or maybe similar, proposals that you would like to propose. And so maybe we can get some feedback on that earlier submissions. And so this way it will guide you in your work. So Mikhail, maybe, I don't know, just in case students didn't have, or some students didn't have a chance to watch the original presentation, maybe just as a very quick, 5-10 minutes, a little bit about the company just to set the stage, and then we will go more into the Q&A format, if that's okay with you.
Okay, thank you, Vas. So we are a small startup company which aims to achieve a big change in the world, and this change is to push the limits of accessibility for all. Actually, world media today heard about Israeli Minister of Energy and Infrastructure who was not able to access the climate meeting in Glasgow because lack of accessibility, and she was not able to do that for an entire day. So I think it is just a peak of an iceberg showing the problem we are trying to tackle, that we have excellent infrastructure and many innovations. I mean, dozens of people came with their private jets to this meeting, each worth multi-million dollars, but the building is not accessible. So public infrastructure is often underinvested. It's not prepared for people who are using wheelchair to commute. And we had both me and my partner in this venture. We had personal experience living with parents who suffered sclerosis multiplex and used wheelchair for many decades. So we decided to invent a vehicle or an attachment to a wheelchair that will enable people to access any stairs and to move freely, despite those barriers which exist in the world. We are 4 years advanced in our research and development work. We achieved a patent for our solutions. And I think what distinguishes us from other companies which also try to do that is that it is an attachment for a personal wheelchair. And that way we offer more flexibility to people, actually, because other players, there is 2 or 3 companies which also work on this problem, and we respect them a lot, but they decided to develop their own electric wheelchair with only one type of sitting and with only electrical mode. So we know that people who are on the wheelchair, they often wish to go with the wheelchair which is a manual one, because it's their way to exercise physically and to move on the flat surface. We are currently in the phase that we work on technology transfer from prototyping to production. And I think we still about a year and a half from market entry. And we came to X-Culture asking for support to check, different environments worldwide in terms of legal environment, but also in terms of social environment and business environment for us to decide how can we internationalize on our way forward, and also to get the message about WheelStair to different audiences in the countries around the world, discuss maybe with distributors or with medical doctors who advise on such devices, and get feedback, and work on promoting WheelStair in the social networks. So that's a brief on our company, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. I definitely sympathize with the sort of the goal and the purpose of the company. So my mother has suffered a stroke some time ago. It's been a few years now. And so she basically has been immobilized, or at least one side of her body is not working. And so with that, she cannot walk. So wheelchair is a way she gets about. But again, any obstacle, any staircase or anything like that essentially makes it impossible to be independent, to move independently. So it always requires some assistance, and it's not always available. So definitely, it's not only a matter of business in this case, but also human dignity. And I guess, a larger help for the economy, because again, if the person cannot, for example, make it to work, the person cannot work. And so with the attachment or with the product like yours, I guess more and more people can remain productive and contribute to the society instead of just being, confined to their homes. So now I'm not sure which way would be best to go. So there is a question from one of the students already, and I see you marked, Mikhail, that you are, maybe let's start with that one and then move on with the question.
Okay, so the question was if the data from 2020 is not available, can you use most recent data available? And of course, yes. Please just provide evidence that you try to search for the data which is most current, and that's enough from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We companies work with limited data very often.
I'll share my screen so that the questions that we already have here, so that should work. So we have several questions that came from the students. So one about partners. So what are your policies for partners? You're looking for partners, obviously, but do you have any, and can you talk in general more, like if students think they can find either agencies or companies that might be interested in either selling your product, or maybe co-developing the product, or maybe licensing it, or in some other way. What are the sort of expectations and the policies, and any tips and advice on how to make it most effectively?
So we are too young to have very precise policies, but our common sense, I would say, is that we want to work with professional partners who are in the business of delivering mobility solutions or accessibility solutions for people with a disability, because a device like ours requires professional training, requires some support in terms of the service. So our basic criteria would be to have partners which are established in this line of business with service capabilities and understanding of a person with the disability needs. We also are discussing this issue actually with the Canadian colleagues who already produce and sell exoskeletons, and they say, for very innovative products like ours, often, established partners do not have enough capabilities, so they are effective with selling things which are already existing, well known, which have been on the market for a long time. So many of them would be keen to take the product for distribution, but they advised us that we would rather work with specialized agents who can work with the doctors and who can be our either sole representatives or representatives for those very innovative, specialized types of equipment. So that's another possibility, and frankly speaking, we have not made our minds yet. So these are two main thoughts I have. I mean, for markets where we don't have enough resources and capabilities, because we will not expand to all markets of the world, in one time. So beyond Europe, I would say we think about licensing agreements in which we will be very keen to develop the product and production with some partners and leave the distribution in their hands. With some support and quality control and advice, I think we can provide a lot of that and support in further R&D. But we started such conversation in Japan, and I'm sure for Americas we will be keen to look for a partner like that as well.
I was going to ask that a little later, but yes, can you talk a little bit more about manufacturing? So currently the product is still made in very small quantities and I assume all in Poland. But it sounds like you're open to maybe either outsourcing the production or licensing the production. Can you talk more about your long-term plans when it comes to the actual manufacturing of the product?
Yes, so what we are doing now is we have made the technological audit of the prototypes and solutions, and we identified the ways to improve technologies for production. By which I mean that, you know, when you produce something in small quantities, you use different types of tooling and different types of materials. And when you think about scaling it for production, you need to rethink the technology and sometimes redesign also elements of the machine. So we have this process ongoing or ahead of us. And finally, we will probably produce ourselves for Europe, and we will search for licensing the production for other continents, let's say, or countries. Yeah.
But you would still be sort of planning that you would still be selling the product yourself, right? It would be branded as your product, and even though it would be produced whichever other country, but then you will receive them and you will sell them through your own channels. Or are you open to completely selling the license and letting somebody else make the products under their own brand?
I think these are transactional types of agreements. So we are open to many possibilities. I think we want to keep the brands in Europe and distribution, but we are also open to co-brand or sell the equipment under other brands. If that's a need of a partner, so we are open to discuss it. And
yeah, that's important. So as long as you kind of keep the options open, the student then can, you know, recommend within those parameters. Another set of questions we got also about the distribution. So students are coming up with all kinds of ideas for how the product would be sold. And so could you talk a little bit more about your vision? Like, for example, literally yesterday, I bought one of those walkers for my mom. So it's not a mechanized, it's not an automated thing. So just simply like a ramp on wheels that you can push as you walk. And so I bought that through a website, like literally just went to a marketplace like Amazon and just bought it there. Now, a product like yours, I mean, I'm not sure if it's something that can be or should be sold, you know, at like Amazon or eBay. So at the same time, students I see here, I read the reports, many of them recommend that you should be selling them through hospitals. Some of them are providing some agency names like governmental agencies that work with disabled people. And apparently in many countries, that's how the distribution happens. So it's not something that you just go to a store and buy. So it would be like a governmental program and a centralized channel. So can you talk more about how it's done now? And so again, what are the possible options that you would like to consider or would be open to considering in terms of the distribution?
Okay, so we are not selling WheelStair yet because we will only sell it when we have this production ready product, which needs to be certified, and for some markets, it also needs to get for approval from external agencies like FDA in the US, for example, to be refunded. So it can be sold for private markets before that, but with some approvals, it can also be refunded from governmental programs. And, you know, in terms of distribution, students are correct. There is a variety of models in different countries. So I know in Scandinavia, it's quite established that tools like that are rented they are bought by government agencies, but then they are rented to patients. In some other countries, they are sold to clients with subsidies coming from various agencies, or with financing from insurance companies predominantly. So I think for us, the task is really to understand those different environments, and we need to fit them because we are too small company to establish, a one standard way. I think we need to fit to systems which are already there. So that's also something which we hope to have from this collaboration with X Culture, that we understand the legal and local contexts.
Yeah, yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I would like to point out that to the students that it could be very, very different in different countries. In the United States, most of these kinds of decisions and purchases would probably be made by the end user. So some of the recommendations or links can be provided by the doctors or hospitals, but most of the time it would be basically you buy a product like WheelStair as you would buy a bicycle or a car. So it's essentially your own challenge. In other countries, there may be a governmental program and the product may be available, maybe even for free to the end user, but there would be some sort of a governmental agency that buys them and then either sells or lends for free, or whichever other way, but there would be some sort of a distribution. And so obviously that will change completely the distribution channel, but also advertisement. There is a question from a student, but if I may, let me go and talk a little bit about, since we started talking about distribution, talk a little bit more about, or ask a little bit more about marketing. So I opened here a couple of reports. So there is one from team 185. So they have students, I don't know, here a bunch of students from, it seems like Australia, Malaysia, the United States, Colombia, so whatever other countries. But when I look at their, so we'll go to some of the questions, but when we get to their marketing section, so they recommend advertisement through social media, and they believe that the most effective advertisement channel would be TikTok. There is Team 195, and they also talk about social media, and they talk about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Do you think this is a viable sort of advertisement channel? Would that work? I mean, could a product like this be advertised through social media or not?
Well, I think,
honestly, up to me, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think increasingly, yes, products with disability are mostly advertised through social media, and the second channel would be at professional fairs, maybe. So there we of course think about those social media as a channels by which you can reach people who have needs and catch their interest. And yes, I mean, short answer is I think social medias are very important for advertising.
There is another team, I think this is team number 173. Yes, 173. So they have a nice report, very informative. So they have a lot of good stuff here. But when they get to marketing, they talk about social media too. But they talk about it not as paid ads, that you would see in your stream, but rather they talk about social media as influencers. So apparently there are a lot of people, not a lot, but there are some people who sort of do video blogs or talks or interviews about living, as a disabled person or person with limited mobility. And so they say that some of these social media personalities have huge followings. So hundreds of thousands, sometimes even millions of people who watch them, who learn about the new technologies or new ways of coping with their limited mobility. And they say that perhaps your company can team up with these influencers. And so I looked at a few reports, some provide the names and contacts, and even believe that the influencers may be willing to promote your product for free if it does make life better. I mean, they're genuinely trying to help people, who have limited mobility. And so do you think that's a viable way forward, like teaming up with some of these?
I think absolutely. We're thinking about a sort of influencers ambassador program.
Yes.
We worked with, we tested that with the person who was in Paralympic team in Poland, and it worked quite well. So the message from him was widely heard, and we got a lot of good feedback. And of course, he has contacts as well to other Paralympic players from around the world. So So that's one of the possible channels. We also identified by ourselves this disability influencers in Europe, and we talked with one from Japan, Miss Yuriko Oda, who is very well known, writing about travel, and she's entrepreneur herself. So absolutely, this is a good direction, and thank you. If you have names in your reports, that would be very helpful.
And I would like to highlight there, so one of the challenges or one of the common problems we see in student reports is that the students identify the general idea. So like, for example, they would say advertise through influencers, but do not provide enough details. So no doubt the company, this one or any other company, has probably thought about advertising or teaming up with influencers and using their sort of followers or channels to reach their followers. The problem is, or the value comes when you actually provide the details. So give us the names, give us the contacts, maybe even find out, are they willing to work for free, just because they believe in the cause, or are they charging for their services? If so, how much? How does it work? So give those details. And so even if you find only one or two and provide all the information, how to get in touch, what are the sort of collaboration principles that they use. So if each of you finds one or two, it will give us a nice database. But if you simply say advertise on social media or work with social influencers, it doesn't tell much. I mean, we know the idea. So now the details, that's where you come in helpful. So make sure to maybe conduct your own research, provide all the details, and maybe even reach out to them and talk to them. Maybe they have some agents, talk to them and see what the rules are. So it will inform you. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they charge so much that it doesn't make it viable. Or maybe they're willing to work for free. And, like in this particular case, I can see how the Paralympic champion, for example, is trying to find good technology for himself, but also for his followers. And maybe he will be on a mission to promote the technology completely for free because it's a good product. It makes the life of people, better. So get those details. That's where, the information, makes it useful.
I can echo that. That's very important. We are a really small company. We only 7 people. So you can imagine that, we are one team in X Culture, and we can only do that much ourselves. So if you go into this practical data and offer us some of that, it will be very valuable to us.
There is also a question now in the Q&A window here. So can we reach out to opinion leaders and or end users that are not from the market we suggested? And I need to explain what's going on here. So one of the questions in the challenge is, can you please identify the most promising new markets? And I'll show some of the recommendations that we've received so far. So, but then the question was also, can you please conduct some maybe interviews or surveys of either end users and ask them if they use any products like that? Would they use products like that? Would they consider buying WheelStair once it's available? But also maybe talk to the doctors, talk to the, therapists, and see what they think. And so the student here is asking, apparently they're collecting the data. And I'm not sure which country they recommend as a market, but can we collect data from other countries? So I guess that's the question, but I needed to provide the context.
Yes, sure. I mean, you can, and be creative. You can think of other contexts. I mean, we are trying ourselves. We approach, for example, a fashion designer, Balenciaga, proposing that when we start promoting WheelStairs, maybe we'll do a show, a fashion show on a WheelStair, because he's very futuristic. So we've asked for most obvious context, but if students have those creative ideas and want to test it, or ideas from other countries, you are very welcome.
Yeah. And such data collection, again, I don't think it should be limited to a specific market, because you never know what kind of ideas you will get from the person you're interviewing. You may recommend the United States as a market, but maybe you will talk to someone from Germany or Australia or Japan or Poland, and the person will tell you, have you considered this? Or maybe you should try, this. And it can completely change both the direction of your report, but maybe the direction of the company. Or maybe you will see that there are differences. Maybe in the United States, the respondents say, one thing, and then maybe in Poland or Germany or Japan, they say a different thing. And so that may inform you that, the marketing strategy needs to be different for different countries, or whatever the. Okay, so there is a question also from Roberto Okan, if I pronounce that correctly, or Akon. How do you advise working on pricing? Or maybe give us more context about the pricing. I know that it's still a developing issue, but what's the plan here?
Okay, so I think with this audit which we have done in the meantime, we also are closer to decisions about pricing which are possible at current state of technology. And when we wrote this first report, I think we suggested we will have a price around 7,500 euros. It's probably be a little bit higher because during last year, you must have heard that steel price has changed twice, almost twice, and a lot of components. There are challenges with supply chains, and frankly, nobody knows if it's temporary or not. But we think it will be good to think about this 7,500 euro with 20% correction possibly, and that's how we estimate the change which happened in the past half a year or so.
One thing that I would say also when it comes to pricing, so students don't think only about the final price. So when you maybe interview potential users or distributors, don't focus or don't limit your recommendations just to the price point. Yes, I know that in some countries, 7,500 euros may be a lot of money. In others, it may be nothing. I know that many consumers in the United States would be very able to pay the money. And then maybe in some countries, the insurance will cover it, or maybe it will be some sort of a governmental subsidy. So the final price may not be that critically important as how the price is paid. And so here we come back again to both who is paying the price? Is it a governmental agency? Is it the insurance company? Is it the actual end users? But also how it's paid. So would it be some sort of like a one-time final, full payment? Would it be some form of a financing? Would it be some sort of maybe, discount for mass purchases? Again, if it's a governmental agency and if they place an order for thousands of the products, maybe there should be some sort of an incentive or maybe not. Again, so all of those interesting questions, perhaps, something that you need to consider and make recommendations about, because pricing is not only the price point, but also, how it's paid. And so it can have dramatic effects on who can and cannot afford the product. Maybe it could also be, I'm not sure if it would fall into pricing, but maybe it could even be some form of a licensing or leasing deal. Like with cars, you can sort of rent them for months or years and then return. And so you pay while you use them, but then you return the product back. So very much I can see how that might be an attractive option. Maybe some people have temporary disability, broken leg or something that you just need for a few months. So you don't want to buy a big machine just because you need it for a few months, but renting, maybe you would. So think about all those options, and as you conduct your interviews, think about what might work. I can also see how a hospital may have maybe a fleet of, 10, 20, 100 of those chairs. And again, leases them out to the patients while they need them, maybe as they recover after the surgery. And again, maybe there would be some sort of a fee involved, but so don't lock yourself into one specific, final price point. Yeah. So there is another question from Roberto. We are also thinking about donation on funding to product. We are also thinking about donation on funding the product to undeveloped countries. Does that make sense? That's an interesting one. So yes.
Yeah, I mean, we maybe I explained that our motivation when we started this company was not to maximize profit, and it's still there. And we certainly would like to have a social impact also beyond the most developed countries. Thing which we discussed, but we don't have a ready solution yet, was to have some sort of a foundation working in parallel with company, and maybe granting our equipment to less developed countries, or even in developed countries to populations which cannot afford even renting or leasing the equipment. But from the other side, we are closer to a social enterprise than a foundation. So we need to have sustainable business to finance that, and that's a little bit of a puzzle, you know, and how to get ahead with that.
I think the question is actually about something different. And Roberto, correct me if I'm wrong. So he added a clarifying comment, but he may be referring to something else in the United States. I'm not sure if it happens in other countries, but in the United States and Canada, so the two countries that I've been living between, so for the last 20, 25 years, we do see a lot of advertisement on TV where different charitable organizations are asking for money from regular people, Americans, Canadians, so that the money could be used to provide help to people in developing countries. So we see a lot of campaigns, for example, for hearing aid. You know, your donation of $50 can give hearing to someone in Guatemala. Or, for example, different surgeries, like there are some people born with like without the upper jaw or whatever it is. And so apparently the surgery itself is not really that expensive, like $1,000 can save somebody's face, so to speak, and the person can lead a normal life. And so they would say, okay, well, your donation of, you know, a few dollars can literally make a difference in somebody's life in, I don't know, Congo, for example. So they would not be able to pay. Yeah, and so Roberto said that's what he means. And so I can see how it could be some sort of a campaign like that, where either a charitable organization or your company or some other agency would literally say, hey, you know, Americans, for, you know, $8,000, you can give mobility to someone in, I don't know, in Guatemala, or maybe, you know, your small donation contributes to that deal. And so I know many of these agencies, like, for example, also support orphans and stuff like that. They even literally, like I knew, for example, one of my neighbors was supporting one of the orphans. So the agency literally sent the photo of the person who received the money. And then they were sending like monthly or yearly updates, you know, because of your money, this kid is going to school. Because of your money, this kid is going to college. I can see how this might work the same way, you know, because of your money, this is the recipient with the WheelStair, happy climbing the stairs and, you know, being able to work and sustain his, you know, so support his family. So would something like that might work? I mean, this is like a long, big.
I think it probably might. I'm not aware of the scale of those programs and in the US, but I know it's much more of a civil society model in the US than in Europe, where we rely mostly on the government programs and there is less funding from NGOs and foundations. But I understand that in the US system, in Canada, it's quite popular indeed.
Yeah, and that's in the United States. It's on the one hand, it's because, you know, people apparently are willing to help. And, you know, apparently the United States is #1 in terms of charitable donations. So Americans do give a lot to charity. On the other hand, it may be a necessity because, yes, there are very, very few governmental programs. And if something happens, you're often on your own. And so it's sort of the common understanding and the need to support, you know, each other, because the government is not coming and not giving you anything for free, at least when it comes to healthcare. And so, but then we also have Africa, we have quite a few countries in Latin America or Asia where such programs, governmental support may not be available. And so I suppose from that perspective, Americans may feel, you know, may understand that, yes, some people may be literal enough to die if you know. So, but in any case, yes.
What we also have discussed at WheelStair is that, you know, there are these social network programs like Gofundme, where people are collecting for their individual needs, and it could be a need related to disability. So perhaps that's also a way to finance an acquisition of a WheelStair if there is no insurance or there is no governmental program. So basically, I think you need to think about this, all possibilities and local context when you analyze your countries, because each has different mix of ways people get their medical needs financed.
This is a very interesting idea. So I've never seen a GoFundMe campaign for, you know, buy me a wheelchair. But I have seen many campaigns, like, for example, we had some friends, a family, my daughter is doing some gymnastics. And so a kid at the gymnastics, their house burned down. And so they did a GoFundMe campaign, you know, to recover, you know, some of the so the possessions all burned, but to buy some things, until and when they're able to get back on their feet. I've seen GoFundMe campaigns like somebody got into a car accident, like a student, and doesn't have the money to buy a car. And in the United States, you must have a car. And so sometimes it's total strangers who say, okay, sure, here's my $50, and hopefully you'll raise enough to buy the car. So I can see how maybe if somebody, God forbid, sustains some sort of a car accident or health incident that leaves the person immobile. I can imagine that many people, friends and family first and foremost, but perhaps even strangers, would be willing to make donations so that they can buy a product like this, so that they can remain mobile. Yeah. I'm not sure if we should go to the questions. I think maybe a few more questions, and then I wanted to show a few more of the, let me see there. Yes, so there is a question about patents. Several teams asked about that. So do you hold any patents? If so, which parts of the technology are patented? And I assume that would be in the context of maybe either fighting off the competition or selling the license. So how does it work?
We have patents, which were, we claimed patents first in Poland, then in World Intellectual Patents Organization, and we received full patents for our technology. There is something like 28 different elements of the patent, so I will not go into details, but maybe I'll tell you about the most important thing. When we discuss patent law, I think very often you hear about the Zinger machine.
Yes.
And the patent was the hole in which the needle was getting, and it was very creative because nobody could design a machine without this hole. So they kept protection from the competition.
I didn't know that. So you're talking about the sewing machines, right? And
yeah,
so
sewing machine, the old sewing machine
goes through the hole at the end of the needle.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought the actual mechanism was the sort of.
So I think we have something like this hole in our patent, in a way that we have a very special way of mounting of our device to a wheelchair, and if you don't mount it in this particular section of a wheelchair, I think it is more difficult to achieve right balance, and this way I think we are protected.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, there is also a question. I'll let you read it. So let me share the screen because I don't fully understand it, but I think you will recognize right away what the question is about. So I would like to receive more detailed information about the medical class. Yeah. And so I have no idea what the medical class is, and they talk about class 1, 1S, okay. 1R. So what is you probably?
So I think 1S is sterile, 1R is I'm not sure what 1M is about, metric, having some way of measuring environment, and we are not in the special classes. So we are one general class sort of product, which means it's most easily approved, because when you have sterile products, you need to have a little bit more intensive, let's say, process of approval.
Okay. So I also would like to share, I think I should share the screen again. So show some of the common answers that we see from the students I selected a few representative reports. So for example, one of the questions asks the students to comment on the strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats to the company. And so I chose here team 1. So this is their so-called SWOT analysis. So with the strength, obviously they talk about, that the website is excellent, the product is great, very user-friendly, unique technology, EU funded. So all of these makes great sense to me, and I'm not sure there are any surprises here. So a huge group of potential users, price advantage compared to the competition. But I would like to read you the weaknesses, and I'm curious if you think that those are really weaknesses or not. Like for example, the company still has a small team, so and that's a weakness. I suppose that makes sense. But for example, weak visibility in search engines. So when I look for a product like this, Google doesn't still list you as one of the potential suppliers. Does that make sense? Is it really the case? Okay. So need for a certified training before the use of the product. So
but that's common for all products. So I don't think it's particularly weakness of our solution, because also Stevo or Caterpillar needs to have a training before the use of the product.
Mhm.
I don't think it will change.
I think that would also probably apply to specialized distribution channels. I guess that applies to everybody who makes this product, right? It's not like,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
And the partnership with a wheelchair producer, I mean, none of producers currently have that, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's something we consider. We are in conversation with some producers, but again, the partnership from the other perspective with one producer would probably exclude us from selling the products of other producers, and this has its limitations. So that's not such an obvious choice, and it's not our weakness compared to competitors.
Yes, yeah, that's important. Yeah, so we are not comparing here, for example, cars to wheelchairs. So we are comparing wheelchairs to wheelchairs. And as I understand, there are really not many manufacturers of a product like this, period. I mean, many companies make the mechanical wheelchair, but the motorized, my understanding is that it's a very, very still, small competition base. Now, when it comes to opportunities, so most companies, this is very typical. They say high market potential, indeed, demographic development, people live longer, and many of them lose mobility towards the end of their life. And so obviously that's an opportunity for the company. So potential government subsidies, increased importance of inclusion. This is a big one again. So 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was not such a big topic. Now, finally, more and more countries recognize that people with limited mobility should be included, like the story that you mentioned from Glasgow. So it seems like some countries are still not recognizing the need. But when it comes to threats, like for example, this one I see a few times. So one of the threats to the company survival could be that what if somebody has an accident that leads to some sort of an injury? Could that tarnish the public image of the company? Is that a viable threat?
Well, it is a viable threat. Therefore, from the very beginning, we work to limit possibility of accidents. We have a document of risk analysis in our design process, and we are trying to identify all potential risks, among us, team of engineers, but also with end users, future end users on the workshops, and we try to design the WheelStair so it minimizes this risk or eliminates them. But also, I mean, anyone who produces equipment knows that this zero risk is something to which you aspire to, and we treat it very seriously, but it's impossible to achieve, right? Effectively, and we need to limit some usage by instructions. That's the standard for the industry, and we cannot advise using WheelStair, for example, on stairs which are badly constructed and have unequal steps or some steps are broken. And of course, I mean, it is potentially very sensitive area, because if somebody uses it in a wrong way and gets hurt, I'm sure we are first to blame, and it's difficult to explain. We try to be very prudent. We have processes to eliminate that, to minimize that, and we will work on this training program also for end users to make them aware that there are some environments where it's not so safe to use WheelStair. So it is a threat, and we treat it seriously. That's my short answer.
Yeah, and I remember the question reminded me of the story about 10 years ago with Toyota in the United States. So the car manufacturer Toyota, so they had two incidents when the car got into a car accident, allegedly because the gas pedal was sticking to the mat somehow, and so you couldn't brake. So somehow, the car apparently, they call it a runaway Toyota. So they just keep driving, and then until the person gets into a car accident. Eventually, it was determined that there was nothing wrong with the car. So in both cases, it was the driver's error. So the person literally just didn't press the brakes, and so just kept driving until they hit a wall. But for a while, like 2009, 2010, I believe, maybe even longer, it was like a big scandal, and Toyota sales went down, And so Toyota and Lexus was affected, and then everybody was, oh, maybe if Toyota is not safe, maybe other Japanese cars are not safe. And so it was a big scandal and a big loss for the company's sales, even though eventually it was determined that there was really nothing wrong with the car itself. So I imagine that with a product like WheelStair, I mean, accidents will happen. I mean, it's sooner or later, as long as enough people use them, somebody will flip over somehow. And so it's always a challenge, because people may come back and say, hey, maybe the product was bad. So you never know. We are almost out of.
So, my advice as an entrepreneur is, I mean, you need to put all the efforts and resources and measures to assure that you limit the risk, and
Yes.
you try to continuously improve and test. And for tests, we used higher angle of stairs than we will advise in the instruction, and we know it is safe to use it. Maybe 5% on 5% steeper stairs than we will advise to give some additional layer of safety. Sometimes we have two mechanisms to assure that some subsystems are working, and if one breaks, the other will still be sufficient. And you need to review the product from time to time to check main components. But I mean, once again, I mean, there are two options. You can do nothing, knowing
Yes.
that accidents will happen, or you can try to do your best to eliminate the risk, and with understanding that it's a continuous effort, and we're trying to do that.
One more question, if I may. We are almost out of time. We usually try to aim for about 45 minutes, and we are over that time. But about countries, so the locations. So is it showing my screen? Let me do one more time just to make sure. So again, I selected one of the representative reports here that lists all kinds of countries. But so this particular team, 173, so they recommend South Korea and the United States. And they also looked at all kinds of other possible countries, like in Asia, they thought about China, South Korea, Singapore. In North America, they looked at the United States and Canada, South America, Brazil and Argentina, Australia, and in Africa, they thought about South Africa and Nigeria. So it's a very long range. And so I guess my question is not so much feedback on the list of these countries, but rather, where do you see the biggest potential? And maybe are there any markets that you considered and then it turns out that they will not work? So you know that they had a bad idea and students shouldn't even invest resources in exploring them. What's your geographic sort of preferences?
Our view is, to work initially in Europe, because it's probably area which we understand best, but still quite diversified. But we also would like to have licensing partners for large markets like US and Japan and China. And we are open to arrangements, beyond that. But I think this will happen, gradually. So, but we are open. I mean, we are a small company. We are flexible, and if there is an opportunity in other areas of the world, we are also happy to explore them, and maybe postpone some other plans which we had closer to our home, if it's strong enough business case.
Are there any sort of impediments or constraints on entering some markets? Like, for example, I don't know, 220 versus 110 volts. Is that a problem? The charging system?
Not at all, no.
Or I don't know, I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm thinking about cars, and I know that, like miles, kilometers, you need to change the scale, or computers, the language of the interface. But I think for your product, it's pretty universal. Right? Like,
I mean, I think we haven't thought about them. It doesn't mean that they are not existing. One obvious area could be that building infrastructure is not suitable.
Like too narrow or too something, too steep.
But we simply have not identified that yet. Perhaps it will come with students' reports.
Actually, that's why. So one of the teams, let me share here. I think that's why I was not sure why they did it. But there is a team that provided like an extensive report. I think this was the one, yeah. So they talk about the different types of buildings and different types of access for wheelchairs. And so they provided some pictures and some explanations. And first I didn't quite understand what they're talking about, but I think they're literally looking at how the local architecture looks like and what are the typical, sort of problems with access. And so apparently they were trying to provide some sort of recommendations here. So again, I need to read the report more carefully, but it does look like they were trying to take the local sort of infrastructure specifics into account, and then try to see if the product can work with all those different kinds of terrains and architecture.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a very valuable stuff for us, I'm sure.
Okay, so we're going to stop here. There was also a question, spring versus fall, I believe. But yes, I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but yes, the challenge is available for the current semester in both tracks, the early track and the late track. And so the early track is a small one. They just finished, but the late track is now right in the middle of the whole competition. So they still have a few weeks to go. And so that's the big one. So we have a total of about 7,000 people. And so it seems like WheelStair is one of the more popular companies. So there will be quite a few reports. I'm not sure if my assistant is here, Julia, if you're still here, but I think it's something like 150 teams total or something like that in the late track. Am I correct? Because it seems like it's one of the more popular companies in the late track.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
WheelStair is one of the most popular company among both tracks, both early and late. So thank you for possibility to talk live, to answer all those questions. Very appreciated.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're going to stop here. And then if any more questions arrive, please do send them by email. And so our wonderful assistant here, Julia, so she's the one who compiles everything, then sends it to the company, this one or any other company. And then she's the one who's also managing the FAQ database. So this way you can see what other questions were asked, what the answers were. So thank you so much for setting up this meeting and also managing all the logistics around this project.
Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you so much. And Mikhail, one more question, not related to the challenge. What city are you in again? You're in Warsaw?
Warsaw. Yes.
Yeah. I will be in Poland in a few weeks, but I will be in Krakow, so a little bit kind of south. So
Let me know when. Maybe I'll make a trip to have.
Yes, so I'm not sure if it
dinner.
will be possible to meet. So it will be for a week just to teach a course at a university there. So, but I think it's quite a distance. So I thought it may be. Yeah.
Please do let me know. I'll be.
Poland is a huge country. I remember it takes about 8 hours to cross it. I used to go to Germany all the time from Ukraine to Germany, so I know that it's about 8 hours border to border. So it's a big,
but just 2.5 hours between Warsaw and Krakow by train.
okay, well maybe we'll figure out something. Yes. Okay, well thank you so much and have a nice evening, and everyone, thank you for your good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.